controller. It didn't work out too well. So what happened after that, Chip?
We were called back into Task Force Alpha. That was the intelligence entity. That's where all of the intelligence was gathered for the South Vietnam area of operations, and integrated and then passed out. So anything that comes out of Task Force Alpha has to be the correct information. Everyone accepts that as being authentic and on target for our intelligence. We were called back to Task Force Alpha. We met for our actual mission briefing. When we went to sit, the colonel called the room to attention, and in walked a general and a couple civilians. We'd already been told that there are a lot of suits around, and that just means CIA in the area. A lot of activity, suit activity, so we knew something was up. The man who actually briefed us, we nicknamed Mr. Peepers because he looked like the Mr. Peepers from the screen.
Bill Colby.
His name was Bill Colby.
And he was station chief there for the CIA in Southeast Asia?
And actually, the CIA does not operate in a arena, was not allowed to operate in that arena as the CIA, so his actual designation was Ambassador Colby, attached through the embassy in Saigon. You know, political officers are political officers, and that's how they get away with that. Yeah.
So this was the night before you jumped on your mission?
It ended up being 3 days before we jumped because we had some weather delays on the mission. The other man that was with him, the general from Washington, was General Haig.
Alexander Haig.
That's correct.
I know him well. As a matter of fact, I interviewed him in the White House on occasion when I was with the FBI. That's another story. I'll tell you that one someday, folks. I never have revealed that to anybody about my interview with General Haig. And then I saw him years later at a banquet, State Department banquet, and I walked up to him. By the way, I read him his rights when I went in the White House. I said, you have a right to remain silent, you have a right to an attorney. And I met him at a banquet years later, State Department, and I walked up, he gave the speech. It was, you know, a social affair. And I introduced myself. Oh, he says, I remember. He says, are you going to read me my rights today?
He's pretty bulletproof.
Yeah, he is. Go ahead with Alexander Haig. So Alexander Haig and Mr. Peepers are there, Bill Colby, who later became director of the CIA.
Right.
And what did they tell you?
They explained to us that the reason General Haig was there is that he was the assistant to our national security advisor, Henry Kissinger. Kissinger worked directly for the president. And the president had decided that it was in the best interest of the country and of the war to see to the end of the war as quickly as possible, and Operation Red Rock was one of those key elements to that. They needed to get the foreign nations, Laos, Thailand, Cambodia, more involved on the offensive level rather than in a defensive posture in the war, so that we could start extracting troops out and leave the arena. What we needed to do was jump into what they had planned for us to do was jump into one of our allies' countries, dressed as North Vietnamese sappers. That's why we were working with these other sappers.
A sapper is what, a prisoner of war?
No, a sapper is a Vietnamese communist soldier.
Okay. Right.
Tunnel diggers. You know, we've all heard about the tunnels over there. Guerrillas. I mean, a true guerrilla, very well trained. So these sappers are who we were actually going in with to Phnom Penh Airport in Cambodia. The reason it was decided to do this was Lon Nol, the CIA-placed premier of Cambodia at the time, was still fence setting. He just wouldn't get in a heavy offensive posture against the Chinese-led armies of North Vietnam. He was sitting on the fence, so we decided if we went in as North Vietnamese sappers and totally destroyed the assets on the airport, which were primarily supplied by the United States anyhow. They were our aircraft that we'd given him. There were some French aircraft on the tarmac, but not many. If we would totally destroy those assets, it would make him realize that the North Vietnamese communists were actually coming in after his country now. And he'd get off the fence and ask us for help. Boy, it worked, too.
Well, you said we decided, you meaning people in Washington, D.C. decided. Nixon himself.
This was actually Dr. Kissinger's plan.
So Dr. Kissinger came up with this idea. Nixon approved it.
he approved it with the statement after thorough thought that, and this was debriefed to me by Mr. Colby, that no one can ever know. No one can ever know what we've done to our allies. Otherwise, we wouldn't be trusted anywhere in the world.
And was that the case?
That was the case. No one could ever know what we had done. And when we were debriefed with a 25-year classification period.
Well, you were debriefed years later?
I was debriefed when I came out of the coma in the hospital in 1971.
Okay. Now this is what year now again? Going back to the
1971.
When you made the drop and you were debriefed.
That's January of '71, and then I was debriefed in June of '71.
Okay. Okay. So you made the drop with the sappers, right?
Made the drop. It was a night jump out of a C-130. Night drop in. Just south of town. We made our way into Phnom Penh. We rendezvoused with our transportation. Our transportation was provided by Montagnards.
Mountain men?
Mountain men from Vietnam, Special Forces trained. Very good fighters, but the thing about Montagnards is if they saw that the platoon that they were working with, and the Special Forces platoons, or the recon groups they were working with, if they saw that they were going to lose, all of a sudden those guys disappeared into the forest. They weren't going to lose with them.
Right.
And they could negotiate those jungles like it was nothing.
Now, you were 13 men. Did you have 13 sappers?
No. Unfortunately, we lost one sapper, and Snake just didn't get along with him. Neither did Pablo. But
Snake is code words for two of the guys in your crew.
Snake and Pablo, yeah. They didn't get along with him. So we didn't go in with a full contingency of sappers. When we did jump in, the sappers had figured out that they weren't going in. We had told them, our interpreter told them that we were actually jumping in to turn them over and trade them for American prisoners, and they were in a release program. Well, they didn't believe that. So they had their own contingency plan set up, and when we were when we jumped in, they simply, because they were hanging below us and in front of us for the jump, they simply tucked, caused us to fall and roll, and tried to take us out.
And how many sappers were there? 12 then? 12 and 13. And
when it was all said and done, there was 8.
8 sappers?
8 sappers were left there.
A
few of them tried to escape and die as we traversed trying to get to our target.
So 5 of them
in total?
No, 8. You had 4 of them then?
Yeah, 4 of them with us. 4 of them died.
4 of them died right after you jumped?
Right.
Because they tried to overtake you. Now, what did you do with the others that were there, that did survive?
Well, we had to leave some evidence of who was providing the operation. We had to leave them on the airport, so we released them on the airport and gave them a fair chance to go, and then shot them.
And in the meantime, did you commit your act of sabotage at the airport after that or before that?
We had several different entry points into the airport. We came in the north side by the munitions dump. You know, when we talk about coming in the north side, we didn't realize that there were mines in this called a dead zone. And it was completely mined between the 2 fences, and we weren't briefed on that. So we immediately knew something was up, and we know now that we weren't to return and we were to be left there.
Well, if you came in and you went through the minefield, you survived going in, right?
I didn't go through the minefield. I came in the front door of the airport with the team.
Okay. The ones that came in through the minefield, did they survive?
Yes. The sapper didn't.
Oh, I see. They sent a zapper out ahead of them?
The sapper, when they figured out they were in a minefield, they let him go ahead to clear the mines.
Okay. So you committed your act of sabotage.
Yes.
And what about ground forces at the airport, the other side?
Well, it was a staged arena. The ground forces had been pulled away. There was minimum security, just a skeleton crew there. We ran across the skeleton crew of palace guards that had been there, confronted them, and had to take them out.
And so was your act of sabotage quite all-inclusive, or was it just kind of a hit-and-miss situation just to let them know that so-called the North Vietnamese have been in there?
No, it was fairly inclusive. We even had air support from pilots, whether flying North Vietnamese aircraft. They dropped some rounds on the airport so that we could ensure that the devastation was good enough to warrant Lon Noel's participation with us.
And you've completed your mission. The sappers were eliminated. You left. How many survived coming out of there? There were 13.
Every one of us.
Every one of you survived.
Every one of us walked out of that encampment.
Weren't they worried about one of you going and being identified as an Anglo at the airport, even though you're dressed in North Vietnamese uniforms?
And there was a contingency for that. We had what's called slap packs. It's a napalm-filled container that we could pour the napalm on the body and pop a magnesium grenade, whiskey peat, and burn their body right there. So
they're not recognizable then.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, you got out, and what happened after that? How'd you get out of there?
The Montagnards, who were tasked with the transportation, we had a rendezvous point. We met, we exited the area of operation, and started heading north out of town. We knew it was 15 to 25 miles to the northeast of town was our rendezvous point where we were to be picked up. But that, it's not like the interstates we have here. These are little roads. We had a first indication that something was wrong because our platoon sergeant, Pop, saw that we were going in a little bit of the wrong direction, and we never really turned to the northeast. And then the timing was off. All of a sudden they stopped, and it wasn't long enough to have gone 15 clicks or 20 clicks outside of town.
So 15 kilometers, you went maybe, for what, 5, 10?
Maybe about 10 after we left the limits of town.
Right, right.
About
so
10
you stopped, and what happened then?
Well, we were in a large vegetable truck with canvas sides. It stopped, and the Montagnards got out, but all of a sudden we heard receivers click. They were loading their weapons. So Pop and my way, our team commander, moved around to the back of the truck. They each took out a grenade on each side and tossed the grenade up back toward the front of the truck on the ground. They didn't pull the pins, they just took the grenades out. When you're a person and you see a grenade fall, you jump, you dive, you try to get out of there, and that's what the Montagnards did. After they'd thrown the grenades out, they immediately jumped out and took control, overcame the guards. The interrogation started, and it didn't last long. They asked the first one the question. When he wouldn't answer, they shot him. They asked the second one the question, and he answered anything we wanted to know.
And then you shot him afterwards?
No.
You didn't? Okay, so I won't go into that. Okay, now, did you find any situation there?